welcome to this session with a focus on the aerospace industry. We've got a really, really strong panel lined up for you, so I'll keep this scene setter very, very brief. There are some very big numbers to throw around. These come from ICAO, the UN agency. $2.7 trillion is what international air transport contributes to global GDP. 63.5 million people supported indirectly in employment, 10 million directly. Commercial aircraft carry over 10 million people daily on 100,000 flights. I could go on and on. These are, though, as you can attest to, some very big numbers. Also, they're expected to increase, throw in their low oil prices, new technology. We'll talk about both of those today. Security issues driving production, and things, I guess, on the face of it, look pretty rosy for this industry. Having said that, and I was saying this to Bob just before lunch, it's not hard to find predictions of an end to the global aerospace boom. The super cycle losing its altitude is how one piece that I read put it yesterday. No big bust, admittedly, but slowing demand, lower book-to-bill ratios, lower profitability, etc. So lots of really, really good angles to explore over the next 40 minutes. And I will, if you've got questions, I will get to you in about a half hour or so. Let me introduce the panel. Next to me is Bob Harward, retired Vice Admiral, former US Navy SEAL. Bob is Chief Executive for Lockheed Martin here in the UAE, responsible for all things strategy, operations and growth. He's been in the news lately, but I promised him I wouldn't mention that.
He mentioned it.
I mentioned it. Jan Pierre, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, Secretary General Aerospace.
You could work on it if you wanted to.
I could.
We'll keep that out now.
I'll just call you Jan.
Yeah.
Aerospace and Defence Industries Association of Europe, Chairman-elect International Coordinating Council of Aerospace Industries Associations, which of course coordinates between all the aerospace industries. Michael Peters is the CEO at NLR, the Dutch Aerospace Centre, where he leads research, technology development and testing. And my understanding, you're doing quite a lot in this region as well, so I'm interested to hear about that. And on the end is Tetsuro Hisano, Vice President, General Manager, Commercial Airline Programs, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, and I believe about to relocate to Washington, D.C. to run the U.S. business. Yes. So we can also talk a little bit about that as well. Right, let me jump straight in. Jan, I'll kick it off with you. I mentioned book-to-bill ratios, I mentioned profitability, I mentioned booms and losing altitude. Where are we in this cycle right now in the industry in general? Put us straight on where we are.
Okay, so thanks. So first of all, I just want to compliment the numbers that you mentioned, because you missed one very important part that I think normally people don't think about that much, and it's how the air transport is actually interacting on global trade as well, because only 1% of global trade is carried if you count it by volume, but if you count it by value, it's 1/3 of the global trade that is carried by air transport, and this is a lot. So this is $18.6 billion a day that travels by air, actually. So it's high-end components, it's electronics, it's diamonds, but it's also things like fresh vegetables and a number of other things that makes a difference from that perspective. So where are we on the long term to set the scene? I would say, first of all, if we look backwards in a couple of decades or even the whole century, this has been an industry that has seen a remarkable growth, of course. And it has been just ongoing and ongoing. And as we speak, the order books are full for the two largest companies like Boeing and Airbus for the coming 10 years. So when we talk about when would the next upturn of the market be, we don't know yet when the downturn will come, because this is still about continuing to produce and deliver. However, of course, this is rosy, but there is a number of challenges that the industry needs to deal with. First of all, when we talk about this forecast and the 10 years of backlog in the order book, it's a market demand that is growing basically with some 4-5% on an annual base for the coming 20 years. So from the 17,000 aircrafts out there today, if we by aircrafts count the one that takes 100 passengers or more, or 10 tons of goods or more, then we have 17,000. That would have to be around 35,000 aircrafts in 20 years from now. And in addition, so it's not just 17,000 new ones, because in addition, a number of the current aircrafts won't make it in 20 years, even though upgrades and things are ongoing. So basically we estimate around 30,000 new aircrafts. So that, of course, is one challenge. You could put the production to that, but you can also put safety as the number one challenge maybe. We've seen safety in this industry increase over decades. Now it's very important when we talk about the growth of this sector that safety stays on the positive trend. It is extremely safe to travel by air today, whether you go and take a look at the figures in exact numbers or whether you take a look at the trends. Safety has been increasing all the time, but it needs to continue. And when you double the fleet, of course, the complexity gets bigger. Then you have another issue of a strategic level, and that is connectivity between aircrafts, between passengers and ground, between aircraft and ground, connectivity in every aspect. We can talk about this big data issue here as well. And then, of course, it becomes increasingly more critical that cybersecurity would really be dealt with at the proper level. So cyber is really an issue that is making its entrance into civil aviation as a top priority. Furthermore, we all know about drones, so that would be a new thing that also comes into. We will see a number of pilot-less or aircraft without pilots. We'll see drones. We will see market developments on that, and all of that would have to function in an overall scenario without any costs on the safety development or safety trends.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to interrupt. All right. So rosy, but there are challenges.
Yeah.
And how do you, I guess in a nutshell, how do you see these challenges impacting margins, impacting profitability, etc.?
Well, of course,
and we'll come on to how the industry is dealing with them in a second.
yeah, I think I mean, as an overall, first of all, it's important to realize that some 70-75% of the turnover from the OEMs are flowing down in the supply chain.
Right.
So this is really impacting a supply chain of thousands and thousands and thousands of companies. And we just heard about the previous panel speaking about 3D printing and so on. So there's numerous opportunities for actually rationale and simplification and so on. But at the same time, with the growth, it is a challenge. So needless to say that this is really a big challenge for industry at large. But maybe it's worth mentioning as well at the same time that there is an equally big challenge on the environmental footprint, because at the same time this industry is basically allowed to continue to double the fleet under the precondition that we can stay with the environmental footprint at the same level as of today,
sure.
Which means a reduction to 50% of the emissions. And this makes it really a race in technology, because it's not just about more efficient engines, frames, lightweight components. It's about green flights as well. It's about having four-dimensional flight planning, which means you keep track on where you are in the length, the distance, in the altitude, in the width, and where you are in time, so that you can actually start, you can throttle up, you can fly, and you can glide down without any interference.
All right, I'm going to interrupt. By the way, please feel free to jump in. Anyone, you know, when you want to add, if you want to add something. Tetsuro, let me come on to you, because we mentioned supply chains, mentioned suppliers, the pressure on suppliers, pricing, etc., and you fall in that category. Mitsubishi falls into that category.
Yeah.
What innovation, of course, is a response to this, and I know Bob's going to say something about this as well. But what are we seeing from you in response to those pressures?
Yeah, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, now we are developing our own regional jet, Mitsubishi regional jet, but now our main business is providing the parts to Boeing and Airbus and Bombardier. It means that we play the role of the supplier. From the standpoint of the supplier, we feel that in these days, the Boeing and also Airbus are very suffering from the heavy competition between both big gorillas. Since the airline itself has a very huge competition, then they try to reduce the cost or price for the airfare. Then this comes to the Boeing and the Airbus to reduce the airplane's price. So because for the airlines, the acquisition cost is very important. Also, the oil price is very important for the profitability of the airline, but the acquisition cost is very important. Then Boeing also Airbus try to reduce their price of the airplane. then these pressure flow down to the supplier. Then this is a big challenge for us to reduce cost. Always we are under pressure from our customer. Then what we need to do is to be more competitive. And at first, we'd like to do, we have done some improvement for the productivity. What we have done is, one is try to emulate the automobile industry's expertise, like Toyota production system. So we have already implemented the Toyota production system like we call lean production system, lean manufacturing system. But it is not so enough. So currently, we are now implementing the automation. For example, utilizing the robotics for the assembly and so on.
Tetsuro, sorry to interrupt again. What excites you most on the automation side right now? Is it the way AI is being used? Is it the way 3D printing is being used? What excites you guys most?
For us, the application of the automation to the assembly automation. As for the 3D printing and so on, is for us a little bit the next stage. And currently, we are focusing on the automation utilizing the robotics for the assembly. So because the mass production, as Mr. says, the huge backlogs, our OEM, our customer, Boeing and Airbus, needed to produce more. So in this kind of situation, the investment for the automation surely pay off.
Michael, you wanted to come in? You wanted to say something in response to that?
Yeah. Well, in line with what you're saying, and of course, to take it from your perspective, we're talking about if you talk about single-aisle aircraft, about 30,000 aircraft being produced in the upcoming 20 or 30 years. That means approximately that the big OEMs, the Airbus and the Boeings, are talking about 60 aircraft a month. Which has to be produced. Well, that's nothing special for an automotive manufacturer. 60 cars a month, it's virtually nothing. But 60 aircraft a month, that's really something. And that means that a lot of technology probably will be used learning from car manufacturers. What are the biggest challenges? Well, basically, I think automation, manufacturing automation, but in combination with the design of the aircraft itself. And if you phase the design processes together with the manufacturing processes in an intelligent manner, then you can cut some corners, whilst, of course, keeping up with all the applicable design standards, safety, etc., durability, quality standards.
Who's doing that right now? Who's doing that the best right now, would you say?
I would not know that, actually. I know that a lot of research is being carried out in that, so on a smaller scale. We are doing that.
Okay. All right. Bob, let me bring you in here. I'd be interested to hear who you think is doing well in combining those things. I'd also be interested to hear your view, Lockheed's view on innovation in general, whether it's happening quickly enough in the industry and how we can accelerate it as well.
I'll tell you, and I'll hit a point maybe these guys didn't, and what I'm most excited about, and the key to all that, well, we've had a long history of investing in technology. What I'm also seeing is the significant investment everyone's making in people. I mean, now with the information available to people, the opportunities to get, we're creating minds like we've never been before. And not only where our countries are, but globally. I think UAE is a perfect example of it. And as you know, we have several countries where we have large footprints, Australia, England, Japan, and stuff. We're investing there in the universities and centers for innovations that are creating great minds at a rate we've never done before. And so while you worry about this bubble, and our bubble's a little different than yours because ours is always linked back to the threats. And the threats right now across the world are greater and more substantial than ever before. As you see in North Korea, what they're doing, expansionist Russia, in Iran, who now poses several existential threats to countries. Those threats are having people look at their defense budgets, increasing them, which does not hurt our business, but at the end of the day, it's those people who really solve these problems that I get most excited about. The number, we run a drone competition here. We get 150 kids showing up for that to design the payload. Unbelievable.
Give us a sense, Bob, if you could, how much your business invests in technology development versus people development.
Well, yeah, that's a tough to put your thumb on. But I can tell you, it's technology always, but people first. Lockheed Martin is predominantly an engineering company. I think about 75 to 80% of our workforce is engineers. I have a young man working for me as a finance major. We shanghaied him to run our strategy here. His brother just graduated school. He was snapped up an engineer, very promising, and has joined the Lockheed Martin. So I think it's a balancing act. I can't tell you the numbers exactly, but I know how important people are to us, and I can see the organization, how we're always hunting for that talent, promoting it and encouraging it wherever we can to get it. And we don't care what nationality you are. If you're the smartest kid, we want you on our team. We want you part of the solution.
You know, it's really refreshing to hear that. At every session that I've hosted here over the past couple of days, we've talked about the scaremongering when it comes to AI and this humans need not apply type publications that are put out there. I mean, is there a lot of scaremongering? How much of your workforce is going to be gone 10 years from now?
No,
It's not going to happen?
That's going to happen. There'll be another challenge. We're going to evolve. I don't know about you. I get frustrated. I live in a hotel. I have to have a queue to get into and go up. And I'm putting that card in 3 or 4 times a day. So it's going to take a while for artificial intelligence to meet our needs. But I think our people are going to stay ahead of that curve, and we're going to need them. So
That's great to
I'm
hear,
not
I've
as
got to say.
concerned about that as others maybe.
Yeah.
No, I could just add to that and say that the main concern for industry when it comes to actually performing for the coming 10 years and beyond that is also about having the skills, the number of people needed for that. So we constantly need designers, engineers, and that will continue. But we need also for these things to be able to, I mean, in terms of growth for the manufacturing industry here, it's not just about being able to produce the aircraft. It's about having the infrastructure on ground, having the airport, security, everything related to that. So as a matter of fact, I think that the industry's concern here is more about can we get the skills that we need for the future rather than having to let people off. This is the scenario.
Would you go with that as well, Michael?
Yeah, sure. It's the human capital, basically. If you look at my company, but we are a research company on applied research. I would even say that about 80% of our people are engineers, and the rest is invested in new facilities. But it's very true. In the Netherlands, I can have an example. Is a very good cooperation between university applied research organization in order to ensure that the knowledge which is invented, is generated by universities, is used to the maximum extent possible. There's a real policy in our country, and I think that's a very wise decision to do so.
What are you doing in this region?
In this region?
I know you've got some programs going on.
Yeah. We were talking with Strata, working with Strata on composite, basically manufacturing and automation. We are working on, because the airports here in the UAE are very busy, of course, and it's a bit... it's very congested airspace, and basically we are working, just to have one step back, we are working on the basic issues of capacity, increasing the capacity whilst increasing the safety, whilst reducing the environmental footprint. And those three pillars of innovation, we work on that in order to make it more efficient to the broadest sense. So activities also include work on air traffic management, safety, collaborative decision making on the airports, environmental footprint. How can you reduce that? All those actions, activities. Which are important.
For us, in order to adjust ourselves to the new technology, new innovation, for us it is very important to have an open mind. Open mind means, for example, in our organization, I'm graduated from the aerospace, aerospace and astronautics. My major was, for example, the control system and the aerodynamics and the structure. But in these days, the requested technology is not coming from such old traditional field. So, for example, the artificial intelligence and so on, and also the automation, we need to integrate the another expertise. So, for example, in order to make our automation system be reliable and feasible, we collaborate with a very special technique-driven, very special company which are very good at making robot. For example, the FANUC. FANUC is a very famous robotics company. Now we are collaborating with FANUC to realize the automation in our factory. So we are not limited to the collaboration with the aerospace company, but also such new entrant we invite to our field.
Okay, let me ask you, just, I guess with my news hat on, the regional jet that you guys are producing or developing, when are we going to see that?
It's a good question, and like the 787, maybe our product will emerge just before the Tokyo Olympic game. So
before the Tokyo Olympic Games.
Yeah.
Okay, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
All right, and in terms of production, in terms of AI and robotics, in 3D printing, yes, 3D printing in the engine business, we've heard about that. What about structure and interior? How much are you using technology to build this plane?
So far, now we are just investigating. We are now research and developing. But compared with the engine, I think the engine's parts are produced from the very, very expensive material, titanium or the cobalt and so on. Then the 3D printing, additive manufacturing, they form from the powder. There are no waste. So this is the reason why the engine has already, for example, General Electric has already realized the 3D printing parts to the real engine. But as for the aerostructure for the airplane, I think it might be the aerospace business, or especially the commercial airplane, is very, very conservative because of the safety. So if we try to implement a new technology, we need lots of pre-experience. So maybe apply at first fighter, then transporter for the military, then apply to the commercial. Yeah. The composite, it's one of the examples. We haven't realized the 3D printing parts into the real airplane, but we heard a lot of examples now.
Okay, thank you. Jan.
I think really the maturity when it comes to 3D printing is something that is starting now, but several of the sub-suppliers on different levels, I mean, we talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and so on, have started to look at it. And we can see, for example, I can just give you one example that I know of personally. I mean, there are so many that I wouldn't know of, but landing gear and things like that, there are special components already being 3D printed in the manufacturing. So I guess you would get a different answer depending on where in the supply chain you would be on the maturity. But it is out there and it's growing all the time. And this is actually something that I think we will see much more of in the future.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and 3D printing, of course, that will never go away. But it's not so much the problem of having a 3D printer and print it, but the certification process. And that really is the problem. And that's why we are focusing on.
Bob, new market entrants, mainly from the East, from Russia, from China, from Japan here. How is that going to change the context in which you're operating?
We see it every day.
Yeah.
Every time we're a program, we're compared. And in fact, I hear often, and some of my friends in the audience here, Lockheed Martin's the gold standard in quality, but we're also the gold standard in price. And so sometimes our customers look at those issues, hey, this is cheaper. But at the end of the day, we see the quality issue trumping the price factor at the end of the day, especially in our line of work. but you're seeing more and more of it. So just like 3D printing, these sort of technology are going to enable the competition at a quicker rate than ever before.
In an industry like this, and this is me asking probably a pretty basic question with a layperson's hat on, in an industry like this, who skimps on quality?
And again, you're asking
given
a seal. You're asking a seal
well, exactly.
Also, so that's the blind leading the blind here, though. But I think it's going back to Jan's point, too. When you get that, you get this level of certification process that has proven results. The airline industry is as secure and safe as it is now. I like to parachute. I jump out planes. I always considered it safer than landing in the plane. But now those trends have reversed. I can't remember the last time we had a significant airplane crash. That's the same sort of stuff that as this competition grows, they're going to have to embrace those standards, meet those standards, comply, or demonstrate and prove that same sort of reliability, safety, and performance. So that remains the competitive advantage now, and I think it's going to be a while. However, you are seeing our customers, they'll try. They will try some of that. Once they use it, hey, we're not getting the reliability we need out of it. Yeah. So it's coming. It's always out there knocking on the door. But so far, it hasn't had significant impact on our business.
All right, that's interesting. Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think you can see, you can comment on a pattern as well. I think we talked about new entrants in the market in terms of actually producing on OEM level, producing aircrafts. There has been a pattern where you can say that complementary aircraft, smaller aircraft has been produced in regions before. So it's more about taking the level up to the big aircrafts, and there you can see that yes, there is an interest, especially from the Chinese side. There is an interest from the Canadian side with the different brands. And we can see an interest from Russia as well. But I think what is important, yes, it will take some maturity before they will be able to deliver on the same level. That's one thing. So this is some sort of a time aspect in that process as well. But at the same time, I think if you take a look at the number of figures, the growth rate, and where the airlines would be, this is also dramatically related to where you would find a growing population on the Earth, on the global scene, so to say. So, of course, the different countries having airlines would be interested in working their way up in the supply chain to, at a certain stage, actually reach OEM status as well. It is coming. Competition is coming, and it will sort of be there. But it's a matter of time before we see.
Interesting to note, and I think as you're going to see this, as you see a lot of different companies, most countries, and I'm talking defense now, not civilian, as you buy systems, you integrate them. You want to have this system talking to that system. When you inject a lot of different countries, that creates issues in and of itself. You have NATO standards that are very adhered to by the NATO force. If you bring in non-NATO standards, not only have you created another challenge, but another opportunity and weakness where you can be exploited. So in the defense industry, this plays out not just in capability of the platform itself, but then your ability to integrate that system securely into the other systems you have.
Right.
And so in the cyber threat, that's a very significant issue for NATO right now, for all of us, and will play out across the defense domain for quite some time.
I'm glad you brought defense into this. How much of a bump up is this whole industry going to get as a result of defense spending over the next decade?
Listen, I think, as I said previously, there's a lot of growing threats out there. The North Korean threat to Japan, the intercontinental growth of and proliferation of intercontinental ballistic missiles pose what can be existential threats to a lot of countries. So I think those threats drive the defense industry in some extent, and our ability to address them or mitigate them. As we move into fifth generation fighters, as we reach into missiles that can extend to ensure that you can defeat those threats a long way away from your country, as we're seeing in Asia right now. I think the industry will be healthy during that period.
And an extra bump, given what we've just seen recently,
I don't
right?
know what the cost to deliver is greater than ever. The technology is more advanced, more sophisticated. I don't know if anyone's gone online and looked at the video of an F-35. If you sit in an F-35 and put a helmet on, if someone's working under the aircraft, you can sit there and watch him. That's unbelievable. You're flying in air and can look all the way around and see anyone as if you're not in an aircraft. That sort of a technology is expensive, but again, it gives you that competitive advantage in defense that we're all going to need when called upon. So always delivering on defense has been a costly proposition now more than ever before. But I think these things, as we're doing joint partnerships, working together to produce aircraft, as you saw, this administration challenged our CEO to drive down the price of F-35. We're working we're very focused on doing that with our partners and the part suppliers to do that. So we want to drive down the cost to ensure we can maintain the stability and security. So I don't know what it's going to translate into actual dollars, but I know we're focused on that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so on the defense, first of all, I'd like to just underline, I agree with everything that Bob said, but there's one more thing aspect to when we talk about aircraft or defense components on the higher strategic level. It's about unwanted dependencies as well. So, I mean, from that perspective, you have yet another one to consider whether you actually import or not your defense systems. So I think we will never see the kind of collaboration that we can see on the civil side on the defense sector for many different reasons. But interestingly enough, I think it's worth mentioning as well that on the overall defense community, the global spendings on the defense sector has been increasing for 10 years in a row. And 2013 and 2014 were quite interesting because those were the two first years in history when the defense spendings globally were increasing in all other regions in the world apart from the US and the European region. So flattening out during those 2 years only because of the spendings in Europe and US and now increasing again. So I think that even if we focus about some, obviously the US defense spendings is the biggest in the world and from many perspectives interesting to follow what would happen there. But I think on the global perspective, we need to as well put our own spendings in the defense sector on the global scene and compare it to what kind of threats and technologies and so on would this be sort of ready to face.
Yeah, yeah.
And from that perspective, interesting to see when it comes to defense spendings, how fast the increase of defense-related RT&D spendings that goes on in other regions. This is really massive.
All right. Just moving it on, something I really need to ask about, and that is the trade context, talk of tariffs, toned down G20 communiques, when it comes to free trade and protectionism. How does that change? I mean, I know this is delicate. How does that change the context? And, let's throw in there as well new regulations for passengers traveling on airlines to this part of the world. How does that change? No, I mean, it's something we need to talk about, right? How does it change the context? How does it change things for US airlines, for Middle Eastern airlines, etc.?
So,
Jan, you start.
If you want me to start commenting it, I can just say that in the ICCAIA, as you mentioned, we have manufacturers from 6 regions in the world, and we have all the same position on this one. We are all in favor of free trade, of low tariffs or non-existing tariffs. As far as you can go, because the single reason for that is that the civil aviation side is really a global business, not just where you find the customers, but the whole supply chain is global. So with thousands and thousands and thousands of companies out there in different regions in the world, it just doesn't make sense. It's just an extra expense if you have tariffs and trade barriers. So we are concerned about these discussions about, okay, would we now see a development on the global scene which is more towards protectionism and things like that, and free trade agreements would disappear. This is a major concern for industry. Whether it will happen or not remains to be seen. Okay. But for us, it would be in the wrong direction.
Bob.
And if you look at our history, our collaboration and coordination, in my mind, had been better than ever before and had followed a pace that everybody could accommodate and adjust to. I think, as Jan just indicated, recent elections and other events have changed that pace dramatically. Now you're seeing decisions made uncoordinated, uncollaborated, that have global effects happening each and every day. And so I think, again, if you think of a sinusoidal wave, right now we're somewhat in that wave period. I'm hoping that's going to stabilize and we're going to get back to this, once we're through some of these elections and some of these activities, that collaboration, coordination, and understanding the ramifications of those decisions will drive the process back to a more deliberate process.
I guess the reason I ask it changes, something like that changes the whole dynamic of an industry, doesn't it? And a momentum can very easily get knocked off course, and it takes a hell of a long time to get that back.
Your iWatch may now be much more popular than your iPad because you ain't carrying it on a plane.
Right.
But yeah, that's just a small example. But a lot of these ramifications, and John and I were talking about earlier, this BritX play is still going to take 2 years. Who knows how that's going to play out? So, But you're right, and that's a real risk to industry. And at the end of the day, we have to write that risk into our structure. And take a realistic look at it. We're dealing with a lot of countries right now. They write a risk portion. We have to write a risk portion into our contracts on them, and we're working with those countries to understand that, hey, we can mitigate that risk and the cost to you by changing some of these processes and what has been a standard operating. So I think that's going to become the norm. As we move through this stuff, unfortunately.
You know, I feel like we're just getting going, but I'm looking at my watch and I'm realizing we've got to end pretty soon. Let me just throw it out quickly. Is there anyone here who's got a burning question for the panel? Yeah, let's take these 2 questions. Go ahead.
3 questions.
Oh, 3 questions? Okay. If you can make it pretty tight, that would be great. If you just wait, tell us who you are and where you're from.
Yes, sir. Thank you. My name is Admiral. I'm from the Ministry of Economy and Planning, Saudi Arabia. So I have 3 questions, and I'm sorry I missed the beginning part of the session. My first question is, recently we noticed that most of the big players in the aerospace industry, they are trying, they suddenly became open to the other markets, and they are willing to make partnerships, etc. So. In the same time, we have something called ITAR. I'm sure you have more information about it. So, how much ITAR works for you or against you? How far we can go in terms of partnership with the?
Go ahead, Bob.
It's almost irrelevant.
Do you want the question one by one?
Go ahead. You respond to that one now.
I would say it's irrelevant if it works against us or for us. It is what it is. We all have to comply. We have to meet the guidelines, and also we all work very closely and ensure. But like anything else in our industry, it creates challenges, but we work through those challenges at the end of the day. So yeah, it's difficult, but it's a necessary tool, I believe. I don't know how the rest of the team here feels, but yeah, it's not easy.
Second question?
Yeah. Second question is, what would be the most upcoming business opportunities? I started hearing about the debris in the space, these small micro nano satellites. It's OneWeb. I'm sure you heard about it. The launchers, the airborne launchers. So, what exactly the most business, the big business opportunities that we are heading to?
Who wants to take that, Jan?
Yeah, I could maybe comment it in a general perspective. I won't be able to go into a certain technology or certain component, subcomponent, but I could say that, first of all, I think that all the OEMs, again, they are looking constantly from their own perspective to increase the competitiveness in their offer. So what does that mean? They are looking for a very innovative environment. So innovations and R&D spendings is always good. So I think that the industry is prepared, the companies are prepared to have a supply chain that is really global and evaluate their own suppliers and allow for competition in that chain. So if you want to make the region interesting for the big OEMs, then I think the innovative environment, so to say, is something that the government could really think about. How do we do that? And this, of course, comes along with spendings in R&D programs. It comes along with clusters between universities, the research institutes, the companies, to create those kind of clusters, to have long-term policies of support. and to have very well sort of the educational program to be able to deliver people with the competent skills and so on. So if the environment is there to foster innovation, then the area is interesting, and then what pops up from that area would be sort of for the different manufacturers to take a look at.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, sure. Well, just to add to that, we discussed the last 45 minutes that the aerospace market is growing, both civil as well as military. But I think what's now new is not the correct term, because it's already underway, is that all those aircraft are connected to each other with other sources of information, and all that information has to be analyzed, has to be transferred into information in order to make the operation of that aircraft or that system, that airport or whatever more efficient. And I think that's one of the major new things which are arising. You talked about the F-35, which is a very capable aircraft, but it's a sensor in a wider network, I would say. And it means it collects information, it transfers information to other platforms, to command and control systems, etc. And their smart things have to be carried out with that data and sent back to an actor like an F-35 or a Predator or whatever. And that's really what's coming up. Internet in the sky, I would even say.
Okay. Yeah.
And also, if I look at the profitability, if we look at the profitability of the OEM, Boeing and Airbus, Boeing about 10% of the operating margin, Airbus is 3% or 4%. But compared with such OEM, such the system supplier or the other suppliers that are focusing on the after service, they are very enjoy the huge margin. Maybe this is one hint to what is a promising area for the data or the service. Such kind of information might be useful for the after service. Service industry will be prosperous because aircraft will produce more and more and more. Then the people utilize the airline. People move a lot of. Then maybe there is some big opportunity for the service area.
Okay. Okay, we'll take the final question, then we'll take your question, and then we'll probably...
Yes, the third question is how much you think you would rely on crowdsourcing when it comes to new projects and new ideas? I'm sure you heard about Google $30 million prize and something called X Prize or Ansari Prize to build a space aircraft that goes 100 kilometers and comes down carrying 2 people. This kind of approach now is being implemented on international level. So how much you guys, the business guys, you would rely on this, the crowdsourcing concept?
Anyone want to take them?
Just to clarify, you said outsourcing or crowdsourcing?
Crowdsourcing.
Crowdsourcing.
Yes.
Then it's more difficult. Outsourcing would have been easier.
Yeah, recently Google, they put $30 million. It's a prize for someone who can design and launch space aircraft that goes to certain level and come back with 2 people. But for you, NASA has done this, I'm sure about that.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I don't know.
If I would just elaborate on it, we don't have a formal position in ASD on that. We won't have it in ICCAIA as well. But if I just would elaborate on that from the dialogues that I have with different CEOs in these companies, I would think that this is still something that the industry is open to. I would say that already with the 75% of the turnover in the supply chain, this industry shows that they are willing to find whatever attractive partner, wherever it can be sourced on the globe. The industry is willing to go there. It's just a matter of realizing where this really helps build the competitive offer. So crowdsourcing as well would be something that I would not guess that industry would be reluctant towards if there is a good proposal. But
Okay.
that's an estimation or a guess.
Okay, let's have a final question here. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, Roland, just goes to Mr. Tetsuro from Mitsubishi. You were talking about oil price is a very important issue, changing the airspace and regional aircrafts coming into where you're going. How far do you think that green jet fuel is, when is it coming? It might go to Jan also from the certifications perspective. And would you use it the coming years?
You are talking about the jet fuel's price?
No, yeah. So the green jet fuel.
Green jet fuel.
Sustainable.
Sustainable green jet fuel. it's a good question. And also the other OEM also for the Boeing collaborate with Embraer, and the other OEM now focusing on such substitute of the fuel, the green, clean fuel. Also, we are thinking about such green fuel. We have lots of very innovative companies which create some new fuel from the from the bacteria, and utilizing some sunshine, and the bacteria utilizing such energy to create some oil. But right now, the commercially not feasible. Then the fuel price is $100 per barrel. Maybe these kinds of solution might be feasible, but in these days, fuel is go down to below the $50 per barrel. Not good for UAE, and Saudi Arabia. It depends on the oil price. Okay. But we'd like to continue to see.
Do you want to say something on this? No? Yeah?
No, I can just agree. I think green fuel is, politically speaking, a very interesting component, and industry is very happy to take that on board whenever we can. But in my opinion, it's not on the quick fixes that this green fueling would be. It's rather engine effectiveness, lightweight components. But most of all, it's also about air traffic management. We need to stop flying around when we should land. So that's
all right.
also
Michael,
important.
quickly from you, and then Bob.
Yeah, perhaps the last remark, or the last one. I think it has to do with the prices. It has to do with manufacturing, basically, which is the theme of this this symposium. If we can manufacture biofuel in a cheap manner, then we'll be competitive. It's just as easy as that.
Okay, Bob.
This is one of those ones where, in our profession at least, you're seeing the military drive technology. The chief of our naval operations has determined and said his fleet, I forget the exact year, would be purely driven by biofuels. So that's going to force industry to respond. So I think those sort of requirements can help drive the change quicker than industry would do it on itself. So I was encouraged by that move. I think you'll see other steps like that. And it's not so much just driven by the price of oil, it's availability of oil and other factors that drive that.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for your questions. Really sorry we've got to end it there. I felt we were really just getting started. But let me thank Bob Harward, Jan Pierre, Michael Peters, Tetsuro Hisano for your thoughts. Thank you very much indeed.